So we are about to have a conversation with Lisa Savage. She is the Green candidate for Senate in Maine that is running against Susan Collins, who needs to go.
And Sarah Gideon. Gotta call them both.
Okay. But I was just referring to the person who's there now. Like I was just referring to which seat that was. But well, yes, this is the Green candidate, and there is a Democrat in the race. But Collins needs to go.
Yes, Collins needs to go, and I think she is going to go. And I think that ranked choice voting actually helps get Collins out because there's less of the forcing of the voter to have to make a choice. Probably anybody who's voting for Sarah Gideon on the Democratic ticket is likely to vote for Lisa Savage as their second choice. And same is true for somebody who's voting for Lisa.
Think, do we need to maybe give a brief explanation about ranked choice voting? Well, first of all, Maine is it the only state with ranked choice voting?
As of right now, Maine is the one only state that has true ranked choice voting in every election.
And it's new, and it's fairly new, and the parties do not like it.
No, and if the party is, it's not about the parties, it's not about the voters, it's about the establishment. The establishment doesn't like it, then that means that you should absolutely embrace
the party leadership. They do not care for ranked choice voting.
We have elected officials in this country right now at this very moment in the middle of a pandemic who don't want to give us anything. So because of that, we're in a situation where if they say that ranked choice voting is not a good thing, then that must mean that it's probably a good thing. So as of right now, there are 2 states, I believe it's just 2 right now, that have it on their ballot as well. The state that it is likely to pass in potentially is Alaska, and the state it's not likely to pass in is Massachusetts. And of course, Massachusetts not likely to pass.
Way too blue.
Way too. You have a major city that is heavily Democratic.
Yeah.
So they are not going to be advocating for ranked choice voting in any way, shape, or form. Alaska's much more of a libertarian, red state. Lisa Murkowski obviously is a senator there who is overall a good senator. But then you have I should know this.
I want to live in Alaska for 4 seasons. I want to spend a year living in Alaska.
Well,
but coastal Alaska. Let me be very clear. Coastal Alaska.
Yeah. Well, Anchorage or Fairbanks, either one is
no, not Fairbanks. Fairbanks is middle of nowhere.
Too far inland.
It's way inland. You want to be, you could do Anchorage, but then there's the cool little places that are there.
Alaska's a state that is supposed to be environmentally protected, and that is it's a really strange thing because it's a very red state, yet, they have this
They have moose.
Yeah, well, they have a lot of things there.
I know.
But
obsessed with seeing a moose.
But this senator that they have in Alaska right now, this guy, Dan Sullivan, who flies under the radar, but he unfortunately has a terrible record on the environment. And the gentleman who's running against him is actually an independent. His name is Dr. Al Gross. I happen to be a big fan of his. He's got a very good track record. Obviously, the environment is a big deal. If he does win, he would, like Bernie Sanders, caucus with the Democrats. But he's definitely an infinitely better option than what Alaska has right now. And Al.
You're only going to get so left in Alaska.
That's true. But again, it's just,
like,
But again, if you can find some of the reddest places in the country, there's a big difference between the local, the state, and the federal when it comes to the issue of the environment. You have a lot of red spots all throughout the country, local governments and even state governments that are extremely environmentally protective. The federal level is a different story. That has as much.
They don't seem to care.
No, they don't.
They can't drill it fast enough.
No, but again, where's the reddest parts of the United States in terms of volume vote? The Great Plains region is probably as thick red as it gets. States like Utah, states like Wyoming, states
Nebraska.
like Montana, Idaho. But what's amazing about these states is that they are actually very good on the environment for most cases. The Dakotas are not. But that's a whole other issue because whether it's the oil, crooked governments, things like that. But, the states that are rural that don't have a very big population like Alaska, you have the opportunity there to really make an impact. And, economic populism goes a very long way. Ranked choice voting is the order of the day for future.
Okay, Lisa's here.
Hi.
Hey, how are you?
Tired.
I am sure.
3 more days. Hang in
sure.
there. 72 hours. You'll be fine.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'm Jen. This is
Hi,
Peter.
Jen. Hi, Peter.
Very nice to meet you, Lisa.
And we were just talking a little bit, we are down in Florida and we will probably be the last state to get ranked choice voting. And so people here are not familiar with this concept. And so that's obviously something that we want to talk about. And how you want to phrase that is like.
No, I think that's the, the Greens have obviously taken a lot of heat. Some is valid. Obviously, most of it is not. But when it comes to the issue of voting, I think ranked choice voting, as much as anything, is the key because it gets away from this whole voter shaming concept. No, you have to vote blue, or it was especially blue, or you have to vote within the 2-party system. No, actually, you don't. And ranked choice voting gives you that freedom, which is why, Maine is the one state that has it across the board all the way up to presidency.
Yeah.
And now, as you know, one of your New England states, Massachusetts, has it on the ballot, not hearing too much good that it's going to pass. And then there's also Alaska. So obviously, we would obviously love for the audience to hear more about your thoughts on it and how that is not just all about what it stands for, but how we can get away from this whole idea that you owe somebody your vote. Ranked choice voting, in my opinion, is how you get away from that notion that you have to owe somebody your vote.
I couldn't agree more. It's really about voting your values rather than your fears. And so with your first ranking, you show what you care about and what you want. And then if you're playing it safe, I mean, who isn't thinking, but I don't want that person? Then in your second ranking, you do the safety vote. But Maine got ranked choice voting. They had to work hard at it. I didn't really work on either of the campaigns, but we have citizen referendum in Maine. So twice they passed it as a citizen referendum. It passed fairly well. I think it had 57%. I voted for it. I signed, to get it on the ballot. But the legislature dragged their feet so much after it passed the first time, because you can pass a referendum, but that doesn't enact a law. The legislature's got to do that.
Right.
And they didn't really want to. But after it passed the second time, they went ahead and they wrote the law that it would apply to congressional races, like the Senate race that I'm in. And then the law for it to apply to presidential race was written a little later, and the governor kind of didn't sign it. She let it go into effect without signing it, which made it come into effect slightly later, which then the Republican Party in Maine kept trying to have it overturned in the courts, saying that it wasn't constitutional, but it is. The U.S. Constitution says the states shall decide how to conduct their elections. The Maine Constitution has an odd provision in it that the state elections must be by plurality, or governor at least must be by plurality rather than majority winner. So we'd have to amend the Maine Constitution to use it for governor. We had a very bad Tea Party governor that was elected with maybe 36% of the votes.
I remember him.
Yeah.
What was his name one more time?
Yeah, Paul LePage.
Right.
So,
yeah. I mean, he was one of the loudest Trumpers I ever heard.
He was Trump
bad.
Before Trump was Trump.
He was Trump before Trump. Yes.
And now he's endorsed Susan Collins, the incumbent in my race. Susan Collins is the most unpopular senator in the country, mostly for enabling the Trump administration's worst excesses. And now Paul LePage has endorsed her. I don't know whether we got a mailer, and I was like, does that say paid for by Susan Collins? And my housemates were like, no, it says Maine Republican Party. So I don't even know if she knows they're, advertising that she's endorsed by this super unpopular governor. Anyway, so the ranked choice voting law that we have has stood the test, and it's already been used to turn out an unpopular conservative incumbent. I live in the 2nd district. Maine has so little population. We only have 2 congressional districts. And the 2nd district is the farther north, smaller population, much more economically distressed. And we had this congressional rep named Bruce Poliquin. I don't know if you've heard of him. He came straight from Wall Street to go to Congress, but he was kind of famous for never meeting with constituents. And he once ducked into the ladies' room because he was trying to avoid a reporter asking him questions. So he was super, you couldn't talk to him, and that doesn't play well in Maine.
You have a low bar, is what you're saying. You have a very low bar there.
Exactly. I mean, you're just supposed to meet with your constituents. It's
Yeah.
not that populous a state. You are expected to meet with the people that you're representing. Anyway, he was being challenged by a fairly young politician who was in the Maine legislature, didn't have a lot of name recognition, and there were 2 independents on that ballot. And it was a ranked choice voting race. At the end of the first round, so the way they do ranked choice voting is everybody picks a first choice. You can stop there. And he had told his supporters, don't rank any, we don't believe in ranked choice voting, don't rank anyone else. It's kind of like saying, I don't believe in gravity. Well, you cannot believe in it, but the glass is still going to fall if you don't put it down.
I don't believe in it.
But most of us would then go, okay, then my next closest, person I think is, I'll rank them second and then third and then, so on. And so what happens is when they count the first round, if anybody has a majority, and that is 50% plus 1 vote, then they win and the game over. Our last Senate election, Senator Angus King, an independent, won in a majority in the first round, game over. But in this race that Bruce Poliquin was trying to hold on to his seat, he was ahead at the end of the first round, but he did not get a majority. So what they do is there were 2 independents in that race. So there was Bruce Poliquin, Jared Golden, and 2 independents. They cross the independent off that got the fewest votes, and they go, people that picked that candidate first, who did they pick second? And they transfer those votes to the other candidates. Now, does anyone have a majority? They still didn't.
Right.
So they crossed the second independent off, transferred those votes. Lo and behold, Jared Golden pulled ahead with a majority and took the seat. So there's precedent for this working for Democrats. And Jared Golden is a very centrist Democrat, pretty conservative Democrat. And so when this race started, I started out as a Green, and I could not get ballot access as a Green because they have made the rules for third-party candidates so drastic that before we hit the deadline, we realized, we're not going to get enough signatures. So I unenrolled, and we got over 9,000 signatures in one day on Super Tuesday. Maine doesn't usually have a Super Tuesday primary, but we did this year. And you can collect signatures from any registered voter if you're independent. So we got onto the ballot and we realized ranked choice voting is going to be huge for us because we're going to really need a lot of number 2s if we hope to win this thing. Of course, we prefer first rankings, but we're not going to win in the first round against an incumbent. And the challenger, Sarah Gideon, the Democrat, is Speaker of the Maine House. And between the 2 of them, they have raised $190 million in this race. It's insane.
It's obscene. That's obscene.
Yeah, they released a report, I think, on Politico the other day. $14 billion has already been spent on this election, and we're not even on election day.
It's so wasteful.
You'll get at least another billion on election day easily with all the advertising and everything.
It disgusts me. Yeah. It all disgusts me. This should be like a 3-month cycle and publicly financed elections and open primaries and just move on.
Yes.
It's such a ridiculous money infested circus.
Lisa, what's do you know what the approval is of ranked choice voting in the state? Do they ever poll the voters and ask them?
They poll them fairly often. Just recently they polled. It's pretty high. People like ranked choice voting. They voted for it twice.
It's a majority though, right? There is a majority of approval.
A strong majority.
So I want to know a little bit about you though, because really all I know is that there's this really cool Green candidate running in Maine, and I was a BNC candidate, so I was friendly with Betsy Sweet, and so and she was very progressive as well, and so I knew, and that's how I knew of you. And then when she didn't win, I'm like, oh, I got to get behind Lisa Savage now. So, but I'd love to know like what your background is. Have you always been an independent? Were you ever affiliated with the Dems? And then anything else I'm sure that's more interesting than your party affiliation.
Well, I've been a Democrat. Sure, I have. I stopped being a Democrat when Obama got the nomination the first time, and he was a senator at the time. He went back into the Senate. The first week, he voted yes on the war supplemental, and he voted to give the telecoms immunity for spying on all of us. And I was like, well, the fix is obviously in there. Forget him. So I switched over to being green. My husband had been a green forever. He's been blamed for every Republican administration since Ronald Reagan, I would say, roughly. But you know,
he's very powerful, your husband.
He's always rejected the vote shaming like bullshit. You know, the people that don't vote are what determines who wins elections. In Maine, we have high voter turnout and it's like 60%.
Yeah.
Anyway, I started being green at that point. And then but my background is I've been a school teacher for 25 years. And
I was so going to guess that. I was so going to guess that you were a teacher.
Rural, a very low income part of Maine. And I just retired this year. I had planned to work one more year, but the summer of 2019 is when some Green Party elders approached me and said, hey, your Senate race is the one to watch because A, the incumbent is super unpopular, and B, you got ranked choice voting. So would you consider it? Now, I had been organizing around climate and militarism for many years here in Maine with a coalition, and we had been working to like convert our weapons factory to, instead of making warships, like make something we need. You know, warships are bad for climate. Let's make like a train system so we can get out of our cars, or like clean energy systems, something to mitigate climate change. You know, so that would be like a double win for climate. And it's called Green New Deal. You know, when you say a demilitarized Green New Deal.
I was going to ask you, what is that? What separates that from Green New Deal?
Well, a demilitarized Green New Deal means specifically in Maine, we really only have one big employer and all they build is warships for the Navy. But if you would build other things, economist research shows you would generate way more jobs. Building weapon systems isn't really a very good job creation program, just in terms of how many jobs it creates. So I had been working on that for many years, and Green Party people knew that. So they came to me and said, wow, you guys are like the poster child for a demilitarized Green New Deal, you know, and you've been organizing in Maine, and you know, you do a lot of, I was always the communications person. I was like sort of the press person for the peace organizing people here in Maine. And they were like, you know, would you consider doing this? So I was still teaching full time when I started. So I had 2 full-time jobs. But I said, if I get ballot access, I'll retire a year early because I can't really do, you know, a Senate race properly if I have another job that I'm working at too. And so but my job just evaporated in mid-March because I was a school teacher. Like school just shut down in Maine and we never went back to school again.
What do you teach?
I had been a reading interventionist most recently. So I was working with struggling readers in grades K through 5.
Young kids.
And young kids. I have taught high school social studies and middle school English. And I've taught I was actually a literacy coach teaching adults, like supporting adults in teaching English language arts for a long time, and then became a reading interventionist at the end. So a lot of my students, my former students, are old enough to vote. And I have been hearing from a lot of them going, oh my gosh, you were my 5th grade teacher back in the day. My whole family's voting for you. So I have some good name recognition just from doing that.
Yeah, a lifelong teacher has an entire bunch of like generations of students of name recognition.
Yes, indeed. I wasn't a lifelong teacher. I was a career change teacher. So I taught for 25 years and retired. Before that, I operated a small family business in central Maine that my dad had died suddenly and left operating. My brother and I ran it for many years. And so I know a lot of people from those days. So
what was that? What did you do?
It was like a cafe and bar. I was the business manager. I did the payroll and paid the bills and ordering. And so
is this rural? Are you in rural Maine?
Yes, rural Maine. Yep.
Okay,
that business was.
I want to go there.
That business was in a town that was the county seat of the biggest, rural kind of poor district in Maine. So it was like people came into town to take their kid to the dentist or dance class, and they would come in and sit around and have a beer and talk to us. So I know a lot of people from then. I was a union negotiator for the teachers union for many years in my district. So I know a lot of people from that. I think that was probably the best experience for running for elected office, because in that job, you have a whole bunch of constituents and you've got to communicate with them and really listen to them to find out what are their priorities, what do they want most, what are they willing to bargain with to get that. And when you go to the table with your team, like you come with the strongest ask, right? but you know what those invisible people that are standing behind you care the most about. And then every time you come from a bargaining session, you need to communicate again with the membership and go, okay, we were at the table last night, we made a little progress on this. So to be a senator for Maine, the reason I'm motivated to do it is the families of the children that I've been working with were struggling even before the pandemic financially. Almost no one has adequate health care. The children have it through the state of Maine, but adults don't. No one has dental care. Even people that have jobs and have a car working vehicle to get there, they're like one accident or one illness away from their whole economic household arrangement just collapsing on them. And I would see the effect that had on kids, as an educator, if a child just experienced eviction, or they're living in a house with no hot water, or their mom has no food in the cupboard, and little kids will tell you stuff. Teenagers, they're of course there's some stigma attached. But little kids will just tell you, my mom doesn't have any snacks, or whatever. And I saw how much it affected their learning. A kid cannot concentrate on becoming a better reader when their basic needs aren't being met.
They're hungry.
That's really my motivation to run. I'm the only non-millionaire in the race. The only one. I'm married.
It's so sad to me. But and what is the Maine demographic? Like, I've never been there. I definitely want to go. It's the closest place to me that I know I can see moose. I know. So I'm on a mission to see moose.
Well, there are really two Maines. The demographic of Maine is old and white.
Okay.
But we have been an asylum state for a long time. And so we have a lot of immigration from African countries that were experiencing war or, economic distress, and a lot of agricultural workers that came from like Central America to work and stayed on. So the newer Mainers are way younger, way less white. And anytime you talk to new immigrant Mainers about, well, what do you care about? They go, education. I came here so my children could get a good education.
Yeah.
So something kind of crazy I did the other night. There have been 5 debates. I was shut out of the 5th debate, but I was in all the previous 4 and did well, I think. I've heard feedback that I did well. But in the 4th debate, Susan Collins had returned to the Senate. Was it to pass a relief bill for the American people? Heck no. It was to vote on Amy Coney Barrett, right? But because of that, she had to Zoom into the 4th debate. So the Democrat said, well, then I'm Zooming in. So we all Zoomed in. So I got a hotel room in Portland, and I invited the Black Lives Matter Maine organizer that I know. She's like the first college graduate in her family. She was a Somali refugee, who came to Maine many years ago. And I introduced her, and we swapped out. I stepped out and she stepped in, and she gave a Black Lives Matter closing statement in the debate.
That's awesome.
The very next debate.
That's why.
The incumbent, we had already been disincluded long before that happened. The next debate was a week later, and the incumbent, Susan Collins, was asked, do you think systemic racism is a problem in Maine? And she said, no, I don't think systemic racism is a problem in Maine. Like, were you listening to Hamdia Ahmed? She just told you it's a problem. So
she's clearly not listening, which is why she needs to go.
She's way out of touch.
She's got to go. So how was it that you were not included in this debate when you were included? Like, what was that where they excluded you?
Well, they gave us different stories. I think the real deal is Hearst Television owns the station. The station itself, I think, was embarrassed and usually gives good coverage to people's issues and was very friendly with it. They did this really nice candidate profile on me like the day before. But first they said I wasn't newsworthy. And then we were like, Bill McKibben wrote about my campaign in his climate newsletter for the New Yorker, Then they said, oh, well, we have all these criteria: fundraising, polling, how you've done in past elections. And we were like, well, you let the Democrat be in your last debate last time around, and he raised less money than I did, polled about the same, had never run for elected office. So it's actually an illegal campaign contribution on their part if they exclude people solely on the basis of party. They're not allowed to do that. Right. And corporations aren't allowed to make in-kind donations to candidates. So if the FEC had a quorum and could hear complaints, they might get socked with a big fine. But Would it surprise you to know that we could rush through a Supreme Court confirmation during an election, but the FEC hasn't had a quorum to hear complaints this entire election season?
Right.
It's amazing
because they'll blame the pandemic.
Yeah.
They'll blame a shutdown in the pandemic for anything that they don't want to do. It's like the perfect excuse.
And it's amazing how much of Reagan's and Clinton's legislation over the past 40 years is coming home to roost now, and people are just starting to see the effects of the tax cuts for 40 years and the deregulation for 30 years. And it's, local media, it ultimately has to answer to the big conglomerates, whether it's, like Clear Channel or whoever owns it. And they have sort of that universal message. The question I would have is, I'm not sure, it's probably negligible at this point, but would you say that the state Democratic Party and the state Republican Party is more obstructive in terms of allowing additional voices into the fray?
I think they're about equal at this point, I would say. Although an interesting turn here has happened in the last 48 hours. So back in the summer, we realized, okay, let's do our homework on ranked choice voting. Australia's had it since 1947 at the state, or they call it provincial level. So we found this academic that had done research. And what a lot of candidates do there is they do preference swapping, which means I say, Jen, I'll tell my supporters to rank you second if you tell your supporters to rank me second. Candidates that are so near each other. So, and this academics research showed that you pick up 10 to 20% additional votes by doing that typically. And he concluded that Poliquin lost the election because he told his supporters don't rank anybody else. Anyway, we approached the Democratic candidate in the summer saying, would you like to preference swap with us? Because the other independent is to the right of Susan Collins. He's a big Trump supporter. And so he's clearly on the other end. And they wouldn't do it. So we internally said, we really need to signal to possible Democratic voters that are progressive. And I'm the only one that wants Medicare for all. I'm the only one supporting a real Green New Deal. We need to let those Democratic voters know, though, we're on the get rid of Susan Collins team with you. And you can safely rank me first to show that you care about those issues, and then go ahead and vote blue number 2. So we said rank Lisa first, then vote blue number 2. And we've been telling our supporters that. Not all of them will do it, but a lot of, on the fence. Yeah. I'll rank Lisa first because I want universal health care. So just in the last 48 hours, suddenly, Sarah Gideon, the Democratic candidate, has realized oh my gosh, we're going to need Lisa's number 2s to win. Because the polling has just been she and Collins are neck and neck. Nobody pulls ahead, and neither one of them get close to 50% in any poll. So just in the last day, we're suddenly seeing in, media that, they're telling their supporters to rank me number 2. Here's the weird thing, though. The only people who haven't voted yet, mostly, are very young people who often don't vote, don't believe in electoral politics is going to change anything. 500,000 of the million voters we have already voted. Anyone with gray hair in Maine has already voted. Everyone I talked to at the farmer's market today had already voted. Because we've been voting for a month. So it was kind of late in the game for the Democrats to decide, let's preference swap. I don't know how that will play out for them. The very young, very disenfranchised, those voters that are just either struggling under student debt or they didn't dare take on the student debt, so they're just working in these minimum wage service jobs, barely getting by. I'm not sure they will rank Sarah Gideon number 2. I don't think they think a corporate centrist Democrat who's a millionaire will go into the Senate and represent them much better than Susan Collins did. So
exactly.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
I have a hot button question for you. Answer it how you like. It's not to, get in the crosshairs of Howie in any way. But one thing that I think could have made a very big difference for the Greens, especially in this election, because we really do not have, look, we voted for Joe. We felt it was the best decision, especially in Florida. But at the end of the day, in
2016, I voted Green.
At the end of the day, we don't have the type of choices that we really want. And the Greens have always been kind of thrown under the bus as not really being serious in any of that. I feel that if Jesse Ventura was the nominee on the Green Party side, it at least would have had an opportunity to get the party to 5% around the country. He would have had a huge impact in Minnesota. He's had a huge impact in various parts of the United States. He's very well known. And I think the one thing that a lot of people, especially on the progressive left, have a very hard time coming to terms with is that name recognition is probably,
it matters.
Numero uno on most people's lists. Trump, listen, before Trump, Schwarzenegger got elected governor of California because he's Arnold Schwarzenegger. Exactly. I mean, let's be honest. That's the reason he got elected as a Republican, no less, in California.
Yeah,
So I'm thinking that if Jesse was the nominee right now, there would also be a lot more attention on your race. There'd probably be a lot more attention on other races. So just from your perspective, how do you think that would have played a role if Jesse was the top of the ticket right now?
I think it would have been huge. Jesse endorsed me early. With a tweet saying, pay attention to this candidate. And I know from inside sources that they would have loved to draft Jesse, but Jesse works for RT and he needs to keep that job, and he declined to run. They kind of, really wanted him to run and hoped he'd run, but he didn't throw his hat in the ring. So I totally agree with you about name recognition. That is just the way it is. But I like Howie as a person. I really like his platform. He, talk about a guy who does his homework. Wow. When you go to my opponent's websites, it says like 3 things with no detail. When you go to Howie and Angela's website, there's an actual Green New Deal there with like a budget and, how this is all going to work out. So I campaigned with Howie when he came to Maine 2 weeks ago. We went around and hit the big spots and did a lot of interviews together and stuff. But if Jesse Ventura would run as a Green, obviously that would be huge. So maybe you can find him a job that would allow him to run as a Green next time.
I think there's something to be said for what's going to transpire after this election, because I think a lot of people are fed up with the way the system is right now. And regardless of whether Trump wins again or Biden wins, I think a lot of people are obviously looking at the prospect of a third party uprising, whatever that's going to look like. I don't really think
I don't feel great about my vote. I'll tell you that.
Yeah,
I don't.
Well, no, I mean,
I'm
look, it's
very
not.
displeased.
It's more of and you never want to. I was saying to people, I was just at a polling station before we started this interview, and one thing I said to people was, you have to stop voting out of fear. You have to start voting out of hope and out of something you believe in, and that doesn't exist. It just doesn't. And
well, let's get rid of the Electoral College, because the popular vote usually is not. Someone wins the popular vote and loses in the Electoral College. The Electoral College was put in for slaveholders to hold on to power. Can we get rid of that now, just as a gesture of?
I actually support the Electoral College, but I believe it needs to be modified. It doesn't actually. You see, the problem is that we are a country that is extremely separated in terms of population. The coastlines and certain parts of the Midwest and in the South have the bulk of where people live in this country. So I would propose you want to say it goes with the popular vote. I'm open to that. There are different ways that you could change it. Like California has 55 electoral votes, but in reality, you could probably have 65. There's different modifications to the system itself that could be made. But I do think that you do need to be able to campaign everywhere. And the case is always made that when that isn't happening, even right now, you have these candidates that are not going to Wyoming. They're not going to Idaho. They're not going, they're not, but even if the Electoral College does not exist, they wouldn't go there anyway.
They're coming to Maine. You know why? Because Maine has that we have a lot of weird things about our election laws. One of them is we split our electoral votes. So we have a whopping 4, that's how we're going to decide a presidential election. 2 of them go to whoever wins the popular vote in Maine, and that will be the Democrat, because all the population is in the southern part of the state, and it's heavily Democratic. Then you get 1 electoral vote if you win in each of the 2 districts. So last time, up where I live, super poor, super white supremacists, super racist. You got your Confederate flags flying all over the place. They voted for Trump. And so Trump got 1 electoral vote from Maine. So we have had Trump himself, Trump Jr. a couple times, campaigning here. None of them wear masks. They're all like in this big mosh pit with no masks on. But they have been campaigning hard for that one electoral vote. They couldn't possibly hope to pull the other three.
That's interesting.
Kind of surprising.
Right.
I do think states should have something unique about them in terms of, obviously we want to make voting more accessible and more fair, but I do like the idea of states having their own unique quirks, if you will. Like Nebraska has the 2nd congressional district that is its own electoral vote, if I'm saying it correctly, and other states have different rules that kind of have their what's their flavor. Mm-hmm. I think that we are the United States of America, and there is something to be said for the concept of a constitutional republic. But if it's not reflecting the will of the people, then that's a problem, and that's where it has to change. Because I actually could see the case where Trump is going to win again, and he's going to lose the popular vote by an even bigger margin than last time.
I think you're right.
And so that
it's a problem.
Yeah, but again, I still think when you get right down to it,
if that happens again, there will be a huge outcry to get rid of the electoral college. It'll be like that. That would be the last straw for people.
I would say if Trump loses the popular vote by like 5-6 million votes and still manages to get 275 electoral votes, then there is going to be a massive uprising of people who are just going to say, yeah, this has got to go away.
Right. Yeah.
So again, it's kind of like the government doesn't want to do anything on our behalf. No. So ultimately what's going to happen is you're going to radicalize the whole country, and they're just going to take, it's just going to go into extremes, which is why, as you can see, Trump's base is extremely rabid and extremely devoted. But what never gets talked about is the economic depression and things like that are existing. What is the economy like in Maine right now?
Poor.
Yeah.
Terrible. Well, Maine was a depressed economy when I was born here in 1956. I went to kindergarten here, and then my dad got a job in California. My mom was from California, so I grew up in California. We went there for economic reasons. I came back to Maine to go to college, graduated into the first oil crisis recession, no jobs in Maine. I love Maine, but I left again, went back to California for work. I had student loans to pay off. But I was able to move back in '88 to run that family business of my dad's. And then I raised my family here and, stayed on. I became a school teacher because it was like, well, I could work for the paper mill or I could become a public educator. But those were kind of, if I didn't want to be I didn't really enjoy being self-employed that much because it's kind of like gambling. You could work 90 hours a week, 7 days a week and still end up bankrupt with nothing. I'd rather work hard and know that the paycheck's going to be there because I had children at home still. So Maine is still very depressed economy. The pandemic's been terrible because vacation land, a lot of our economy is based on tourism.
Florida too.
Yeah. So, okay. You know what? I appreciate your time so much. I know that this is like you're down to the wire, and I wish I could vote for you. I really do wish I could vote for you. So do you why don't you close, say something like, whatever your spiel, and we're going to share this and put it on everything.
Sure. Thanks. Well, I am running to win. I'm not just in it to change the conversation. I'm in it to win it. It's going to take some luck. It took a lot of hard work, but we have had the most amazing team, hundreds of volunteers. We have donations from all 50 states. We have volunteers from other countries that work remotely. It's just been amazing. And I feel really honored to be the spokesperson of the team and for them to have the trust that I would, go to Washington and actually be true to my values. Our website is lisaformaine.org with the 4 spelled out FOR. And we still welcome your support. And we'd love to hear from you. We're on social media as Lisa for Maine, at Lisa for Maine. So like our posts, share them, comment on them. That's really helpful. And if you have any friends in Maine, tell them rank Lisa first if you want Medicare for all.
Definitely.
Don't we all need universal health care in a pandemic?
Yes.
What we have is a fantastic candidate in yourself. And because most people perceive it, because you have ranked choice voting, you are a safe vote.
They're very safe.
is
That's
why-
the thing. No fear mongering.
Yep, and that's why a lot of people are volunteering for you. And again, it's the dirty secret of politics. Unfortunately, your two opponents, the two primary opponents, have a lot of money behind them, and that's endless TV advertising and all the jazz that comes with it.
Yeah.
But we are fighting for a more fair and just electoral system, and with a candidate like you, we're on our way. It's going to take a while, but we're very grateful you're doing it, and we certainly wish you all the best of luck the rest of the way.
I was so nice to meet you. I've been a fan, and you will be an amazing senator. I'm happy for the people of Maine that they have someone like you there.
Thank you so much.
It was nice to meet you.
It was nice to meet you too. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure.
Bye.
Bye-bye.